here you go. Here's some XDC. And you know what? We've been covering this for over a year now and so on. So shout out to you guys who got XDC like under 2 cents, right? You are so ecstatic. And how about this? A bigger shout out to you guys who not only hold XDC, like you have some GBEX, you have some XSwap, especially XSwap, right? Maybe some guys took profits when it was just going parabolic a few days ago, right? I even called up Mike Cornwell. I was like, oh my God, look at XSwap. Do you have some XSwap? So whatever the case be, let's jump into some XDC. Please smash that like. Shout out to Crypto Nair D. Give him a follow on crypto Twitter. Also, if you're not doing so already, please follow me up here all the way up at DPG Maximus. I try to keep you guys informed. A lot of times I do post videos and retweets, but I also do my own take on research, and I do outlines as well. I might not do it every day, but I'm trying to up my game on that as well. But here we go. Let's jump into the coverage. So XDC, the Electronic Trade Documents Act, not bill, act, is not yet enforced. Now, this is something that needed to be reported on, right? Because some people feel as though, well, if it's an act, that means it's implemented, it's being used. No. Pump the brakes on that for a bit. This is not FUD, but I want people to understand some of this, okay? So not yet enforced. This will come into effect 2 months from the day it was passed. So as we know, this was passed not that long ago, okay, by, was it British, the House of Commons and so on, and then actually officially signed by King Charles. But it says basically being, this is going to go into effect September 20th of 2023. It will not apply to bills of lading issued prior to that date. He does take M letter. We know about some of these stuff, right? And ETDA. It says the act aims to facilitate functional equivalence between electronic bills of lading and other documents and their paper counterparts. We're going to jump into this a brief bit, and I'll give you my own take on this in a second. But basically speaking, let's blow this up. And it says the act is not yet in force. Like we mentioned, the act aims to facilitate functional equivalence between electronic bills of lading and other documents and their paper counterparts. It is trite law that a bill of lading has 3 key functions. And again, this is some of the key areas that you want to pay attention to, especially if you hold XDC, but you want to know something, even if you don't hold XDC, right? Let's say you just have VeChain. Let's say you just have Morpheus Network, or maybe you have 2 of those. You don't have XDC. It's all worth paying attention to, because if anything, it will affect what the modern way of how trade works. That's the bottom line, whether you own the crypto or not. So number 1, evidence of the contract of carriage, a receipt for the goods, a document of title, possession of which gives the lawful holder a right to deliver, or the delivery of the goods. A little bit more about this. It might be kind of hard to see this, so I'll blow this part up a little bit more for you guys, so you can see it a little bit better. All right. I think you can see it nice and big now. And it specifically states on this one, let's go up to the top. Digitalization of the shipping industry continues to be high on the agenda, with the bulk carrier sector and container lines recently committing to increased use of electronic bills of lading, for example, e-bills, if you're wondering what that means in layman's terms, I guess you could say, by 2030 and 2025 respectively. An important and sometimes overlooked aspect of digitalization is the opportunity it presents for ship owners to reimagine and redesign their systems and processes. Now, I want to pause here for a second and give you my own perspective on some of these things and why we should all pay close attention to this. So, like I mentioned before, there was so much focus about ISO 222 on March 20th. Oh man, this should really pump the cryptos. It's a messaging system. That's not utility being used, right? That just means that basically, these banks and so on have the option of, I guess you could say, implementing this, but is it implemented and is it actually being used? The answer, for the most part, was no. But with XDC, we did see, for instance, that was significantly up, right? I think we saw March 20th was something like, I don't know, 40, 45%, maybe 50% briefly up. Of course, what happened with the whole thing of FedNow recently, XDC seemed to be up, but not for the reasons of FedNow, right? Mainly for the reasons of the electronic trades documents bill that became an act. It was, just coincidence right around the same time. My key thing is this. If this thing, I should say if, right, when this thing helps basically solve a problem of supply chain, breakdowns of the supply chain, right, logistics and all that, the ability of not having to jump through so many hoops, if you will, when it comes to actual, not just physical documents, but digital documents going from point A, not just to point B, but like all the different layers of people that have to sign off on crap, right? The bureaucratic nonsense of signing off for this, and then another guy, and another guy, and another guy. You want to talk about supply chain problems, and we saw supply chain problems when it came to the height of the pandemic, did we not? Oh my God, it was like all over the world, right? So jump back to ISO 222. While there's so much talk about ISO 222 benefiting XRP and XLM, and rightfully so, and some of these other ones, don't get me wrong, right? Understand that, on-demand liquidity through Ripple's XRP is a big, big deal. Yeah, granted, we're not going to talk about that right now. That's a different story. We already have talked about that many times. But if you literally can have a messaging layer, if you will, that's going to be insanely more efficient and faster and so on, and cut out some of these, I guess you could say, some of the middlemen, right? Making things, here's the message or the receipt of sale, if you will. But you could do it with the ISO 222 standard through the trade industry. Hence, the gentleman, I can't reference his name. I can't remember his name, but you guys know what I'm talking about. He tested this. He was able to send an ISO 222 message, right? And he used XDC as collateral. That's huge. So when this goes into place, and we were talking about specific dates, and I don't like to do this all the time because, it is a case sometimes of buy the rumor, sell the news. Well, here's the next big date. What was it? September 20th? Yeah, that could be a big date for XDC. Why would I say that? Because the last 2 times or 3 times, it was bigger for XDC than it was for the other ones that we talk about so much. All right, let's go down further into this. An important, sometimes overlooked aspect of digitalization is the opportunity it presents for ship owners. I mentioned that part, sorry. The Electronic Trade Documents Act, which passed into law on, again, another thing on the 20th. Why is everything on the 20th? Again, September 20th now. First was March 20th. Then you guys with your 420. Then July 20th with FedNow, right? Then on top of that, the electronic trade documents, like that's why. All right, so it was the same time, my bad. And then now this next thing, September 20th. So it's always on the 20th. Anyway, it says basically passing the law July 20th offers just such an opportunity. The act is technology neutral, deliberately not favoring a single technology so as not to inadvertently limit the means in which the aims of the act can be achieved. As such, it challenges those who wish to adopt e-bills, remember we talked about that earlier, bills of lading, to make their own assessment of whether the systems they use comply with the requirements set out in the act and in turn benefit from the protections it provides. But the main key thing is taking out all these, I don't know how, I do not explain this. Picture track in a field. Just hear me out on this second. I'm going to give you a visual, right? The way I look at it is like you have that runner who's in the race. I know you always use runners and races as an analogy, but it's a good analogy. This is not some, 50-yard dash or anything like that, right? But if anything, you have this race and you have these runners. You could call it like, I guess you could say delivery men, drivers, guys shipping across from a port of Madrid or something like that, or London, England, whatever the case, right? And they're bringing all these over to like New York Harbor, or, Port of Los Angeles, San Francisco, you name it, right? Where there's a port. And if anything, it's like cutting out these hurdles. So again, that race, less hurdles means more of that volume of that trade just being able to flow. Now, hear me out one more time on this, okay? Because you got that visual in your head. The reason why this is so darn significant is if we talk about blockchain solutions, or we talk about Ripple's XRP, that on-demand liquidity, how that's so big for the central banks and so on of the world, and it is, right? Nostro Vostro is no joke, right? But being able to prove, like, here's my drink, there's nothing in there, right? But, hey, central banks of the world, how would you like to refill on that ODL, that on-demand liquidity? Ripple provides that solution, right? But I'm talking about XDC. All right, well, let's talk about XDC. Being able to have this put into law and the act and implemented and so on cuts out barriers that create just as significant volume, if you will. We talk about Ripple's on-demand liquidity. This creates trade volume like nobody's ever seen before. I think you see less supply chain issues. I'm telling you flat out, less supply chain issues, because it cuts out a lot of this. And I saw an interview recently. I don't know if I have the video on it. Hopefully I still have it from earlier. But it talks about a lady who understands the law about this and so on, and she explains it a little bit more eloquently than I can. But again, this is the trade sector. That is such a huge multi-trillion-dollar sector. You own XDC, be glad that you own it. But don't let your emotions get in the way. If you see another time period from now till September or afterwards, before we get to the real true bull market, where it kind of levels off a little bit. But if you're a long-term holder, you already know where this thing is going, right? This is part of that generational wealth. Requirements set out in the act, it turns to benefit from the protection it provides. Provides a lot of protection, also cut out a bunch of hurdles. Red tape, that's the main thing. Suppressing supply chain is a big, big problem. All right, I want to jump into the next part of what we have in regards to this. Like I mentioned before, the act aims to facilitate functional equivalence between electronic bills of lading and those other documents, and also their paper counterparts. This part where I want to get to, this comes from Indeed. It states specifically, look at this for a second, because we're on the topic of XDC. When it comes to issuing digital bills, right, the process will likely involve hold on a second, that's not the one. I'm so sorry. That wasn't it. I wanted to interview. I was going to give you a little brief interview. I'm going to try to see if I could pull up that interview. It was such a cool interview with this lady. Let me see. I apologize. You know what? What happened earlier is this lady was being interviewed, and I was trying to pull up some things, and it's just, I don't know. Some of the things kind of go away, but she basically works in the industry that analyzes, I guess you could say, the law. She was interviewed, I guess, in the UK. This is a different lady. This one's good as well. I'm going to share this with you guys real quick. This one's only about a minute. Before I get into it, I'm going to pull this up and share this tab. Smash that like. Look at this for a second. This is good stuff. So it states, and this again from CryptoNair D, XDC ICC DSI team is spearheading the charge towards a more inclusive and efficient world of digital trade. Again, back to what I was talking about. The whole concept of why this matters is to make things obviously run more efficiently, right? We have a big problem when it comes to supply chain. It's always breaking down. Like, I'll go to the store. Hey, you guys are out of this. Sorry, man. We won't get that probably for at least 3 months. 3 months? Why is that? We got to break down in the supply chain. God, you know what I mean? It's so frustrating, right? But understand, where we're going with some of this. There's a reason why, putting politics aside, that I do like the idea that there's some proponents that honestly understand the concepts of blockchain and DLT. I think Warren Davison honestly gets it. I think Tom Emmer gets it, and so on. I understand that some people feel as though like they get criticism, like, oh yeah, now they get it because for political reasons. Okay, but at the same time, I like the idea that we do at least have some people in office that are going to be proponents of blockchain innovation. And for instance, when it comes to advancing these technologies and not just leaving the United States and so on, right? That's the key thing. And I think they get the whole concept of this electronic trade documents bill. I mean, yeah, that's something over the UK, but it literally affects the world trade. So let's jump into this part of why the UK leads the charge in regards to trade and why it matters to us, and especially if we're XDC holders, which a lot of us are. All right. This aligns perfectly with the UK's recent announcement about the Electronic Trade Documents Act. This is, of course, set to boost not only the UK economy, but let's be honest, it's going to boost the economies of many different nations around the world, because this is literally like world trade law, if you will, right? Just because it's something that's put into the UK doesn't mean that many other countries are going to benefit from it. They're, of course, going to benefit from it. If you have a port, and I'll use this example again, let's mention, I don't know, let's say Lisbon, Portugal, right? Breaking down of the supply chain, right? Well, they didn't sign or agree to some of these things, right? But again, a world trade documents bill saying, or act going into law saying, hey, you want to know something? This is what we're doing. This will not only benefit us, will benefit you. Then all of a sudden, like literally, instead of having things broke down within 90 days, you can literally see the reaction, not just waiting for 90 days, 60 days, 30 days, and so on. Literally within a few days, or literally within hours. You don't have cases of, this giant ship like that looks like an Exxon, remember the Exxon Valdez thing back in the past, big old giant cargo ship with all this freight, all this cargo, and it's just sitting there. It can't move due to breakdowns in supply chain. It benefits everyone. We want to talk about helping the world economy. This is the answer, in my opinion. But anyway, the act marks a significant leap towards innovative digitalization, streamlining trade processes, and paving the way for prosperous future. We need this now. All right, so she goes in detail about this. I know I want to kind of on a spiel. The Digital Standards Initiative is a public-private partnership. Let's play this.
So the Digital Standards Initiative is a public-private partnership dedicated to working with both the public and private sectors to advance and accelerate our journey towards digital trade. In the world of digital trade, every time a good crosses a border, we are using common standards, common practices, regardless of countries and sectors and an organizations being large or small. It means that trade is transparent and inclusive and fast. We need this now. We have the data, we have the technology, we have the public will and the private sector urgency to reach this world.
All right, glad to share that obviously with you guys. I'm gonna get into a little bit more of this in a second. I'm just trying to pull up the other one I have. Smash that like for some XDC. You'd be glad you did. And if this is your first time ever even tuning in or hearing about XDC, well, then you're in for a treat because it's some good stuff. So let me turn off some banners to put some emphasis on this for a brief moment.
Why is it important to pass this trade bill in the UK? And can you give some of the reasons behind the creation of the bill?
Yes, absolutely. So
sorry, I had to let you guys know this was the one I viewed earlier that I was talking about with this lady. This lady knows this like the back of her hand. So I'm really glad I was able to re-find it from a different source, but this is the one I was talking about. So here we go.
what I've been researching, obviously, is the legal barriers to digitalization. And what the bill does is it solves what is called the possession problem by the Law Commission. Essentially, it covers documents which are used in a very specific way in international trade. Essentially, this type of document gives the person who possesses it, if that person received it as a result of being issued it, or received it pursuant to a valid transfer, it gives that person the right to claim performance of the obligation that's recorded in the document. So these are very, very important documents in international trade, and they function on the basis of possession. Now, the possession problem is that only tangible things can be possessed, and that is true of the law of many, many jurisdictions. It's almost invariably the case across the world. So the bill is there to basically recognize that electronic documents that fulfill certain criteria are capable of being possessed at English law.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And just a question on the UNCITRAL, so the United Nations version of this, so the model law on electronic transferable records. That's quite hard to adopt into English law, right? And that's largely because of this possession piece and also the piece around tangible items, right?
Well, the model law was designed to solve precisely the same problem, because, as I said, this possession problem is common to many jurisdictions, and it solves it in substantially the same way. Basically, the model law says that if an electronic document is controllable, then possession requirements in the law can be met by that document. So essentially, the principles are the same. If you fulfill certain criteria and make the document controllable, that's the main criterion, then the document can satisfy the law's requirements for possession.
Sure, okay. So now the Trade Documents Bill is being passed through the House of Parliament, so the House of Lords and the House of Commons. Can you give us an update of where we're up to right now, today, in April?
Yes, so it's very exciting times. The bill has passed through the House of Lords, all the stages in the House of Lords. So it's received its final reading on the 23rd of March. And on the same day, it's moved to the Commons, and it received its first reading in the Commons. And now it's gone to the second reading, and it can be considered an uncontroversial bill. So the likelihood of it needing to be debated in a committee is quite low. And then after the second reading, it will be considered by the House, and it will go on to the final stages.
Thank you very much. So the bill, or the ETDB for short, what's the likelihood of it actually being used in reality? And can you give some practical use cases for the bill, given your expertise and also the length of time at which you've been researching the bill?
Okay, well, I'll try. So the bill is likely to be useful in two ways, in my view, once it becomes law. First of all, it will give predictability to stakeholders. So basically, it answers the question, if I want to set up a system that achieves certain effects, legal effects, for the purposes of UK law, how do I do it? What requirements do I need to meet? And it basically sets out these requirements. So if the bill sets out these requirements, so if the system meets those requirements, then you have some reassurance, both as a system provider and as a potential system user, that it's going to do what you want it to do legally. The second way it's going to be useful is if a dispute arises. So if a dispute arises concerning an electronic trade document, or to which an electronic trade document is relevant, then the parties to the dispute know that this document is going to be treated in the same way as its paper counterpart. And the paper counterparts have very hefty evidentiary value in legal terms. So in certain circumstances, they can be considered incontrovertible evidence of their contents. So it's really, really important to have the electronic bill, the electronic document recognized as at law the same as its paper counterpart.
Thank you, Miriam. Now, the ETDB, it's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? The ETDB aligns with the UNCITRAL MLETR, which has already been adopted in many markets: Bahrain, Abu Dhabi Global Markets, Singapore, and France, Germany, and of course the UK equivalent on its way. What are the benefits of legal harmonization in this space?
So I think the importance cannot be overstated, really, because we're talking about activities which by definition occur across borders. We're talking about international trade, international transportation of goods, and we're also talking about services that are provided to users that are operating in this international environment. So it's really important that basically legal risks are minimized by ensuring that the requirements that have to be met in the various parts of the world are substantially the same requirements, and that the legal effects of meeting those requirements are substantially the same effects. So this is why it's so important to ensure that there's quite a widespread drive towards law reform in this space. I mean, in the meantime, both the model law and the UK bill, they include conversion to paper provision. So in the model law, there's 2 articles on conversion, one in one direction, the other in the other. In the bill, they are treated in one provision. But basically, the idea is if you can't achieve the legal effects you want in this jurisdiction using the electronic document, then you have the option of switching to the paper form for those purposes. But ideally, what we want in order to have genuine digitalization across the board is for widespread law reform.
Thank you very much, Miriam. And I guess on that note of reforming UK law, where do you think there's going to be the greatest need for focus for when it comes to academic research within this field moving forwards?
So lots of areas where unknowns remain, and those areas are ripe for academic research. I mean, as an academic, it's a privilege because we get to research whatever we want when we want, and the years of research that preceded these reforms meant that when they needed to happen, when COVID made it really imperative that we reform the law, we could do it quickly. So the Law Commission came up with its recommendations in record time. So other areas where I think we will need to do research in the future, well, at the moment, I'm researching the governance mechanisms that underpin these digitalization initiatives, which are being led by industry. So I'm trying to understand their nature and effectiveness. Another area which I think it is really important to do research in the future would be cyber risk and its potential to become systemic. So essentially, we need to answer questions such as how can we prepare for a major cyber event, whether it's cyber malfunction or cyber attack. How can we best allocate these risks? How do we do it most efficiently? How do we mitigate them? and what is the role of law and regulation. So all of these things are things that I'm very much looking forward to researching in the future.
Miriam, thank you for joining us.
All right. Glad to share that with you guys. I'm going to give you guys just a few things that I have on my notes, I guess you could say, like Biggie Smalls, relax and take notes. So she was talking about a few key things, right? I like the idea that you're going to be able to take custody of, for instance, the document, okay? Not necessarily so much on the paper version, but she said that, you have the option of doing that. The digital form of that. You guys, unless you've been living under a rock your whole life, right? Who doesn't order, items from Amazon, or, you have UPS deliver things for you and so on. That guy comes up and he's got, a thing, obviously a lot bigger than this thing, but, it looks like a little Palm Pilot, right? And then, he scans things, and then, he verifies basic things in this system. Well, imagine all those things being able to be tied to, for instance, an actual ledger, right? That verifies some key things. So basically speaking, not having to go through so many channels regarding the document like it was before, right? Cutting out, we talk about middlemen, but it's so much more than just middlemen. It's, hey, I got to get this guy to sign off at, on this, literally at the dock or the port, down at, picture a bunch of longshoremen, right? You guys see me in a thumbnail with that, right? Taking that out of the equation where, it's just, things are just smoothly going, right? You heard Gilbert Verdian talk about, or things future proof. Well, yeah, it's actual law. Being able to legally take custody of the document with ownership with digitalization. On top of that, this recognizes law and its paper counterpart by referencing what is on a blockchain, and listen to this, instantly on a ledger. How cool is that? Verifiable on ledger. That's a game changer. Benefits are that this will benefit not only the United Kingdom, but it's also going to benefit international trade. And then this last part. This will help This will help solve supply chain scalability problems by alleviating barriers by eliminating hurdles with the current system of just that, international trade. So I think it's a big win, and the market has responded with that. That's why you consistently see XDC up, and anything pretty much tied to XDC. XSwap was, a few days ago, like one day up over 85%. On the week, it was like 150, 160%. I even showed up Mike Cornwell. I'm like, oh my God, look at this God candle, 1 hour God candle, 45% up on XSP. So you guys hold XSP. Congratulations, right? Pretty cool stuff.